Church Eat Church, where we're going to have Bible class, worship God. We're going to have a potluck meal. Actually, it's catered today, I believe, not potluck. And then we'll have one more service after that. But as we typically do on our fifth Sunday schedules, we have a guest speaker. And today we have with us Brother Keno Shrum. He is associated with the House to House, Heart to Heart. And we know that Brother Rob's going to be coming to us in January, and so as we've kind of been saying, he's been our John the Baptist preparing the way for that, if you will. But we're so fortunate, so glad that he has come out. In fact, if I understand, he's actually coming back from work in Hawaii, so we actually drug him away from that, and now he's here in Garland. So we might have to apologize to him and feed him very well to make up for that, but we're so glad that he's here. I'll introduce him much more in the worship hour, but as of now, Brother Keno, if you would come and preach God's word to us.
Good morning, everybody. I appreciate you allowing me to be here this morning. I want to make sure that we understand I was not working in Hawaii. I was working on resting in Hawaii. So, but we had a wonderful time down there. Jamie and I are blessed to travel. We go to about 45 congregations a year of the Lord's church, and we speak on evangelism. I work with the House to House School of Evangelism. Of course, you know, Rob will be coming here in a few short weeks. You're going to have a great time when he comes. He's a lot of fun, and he brings some really, really good information. And so we travel about 220 nights a year, and you would think when we get a day off, we'd want to spend it at home, but we decided to use some of those miles and points and all that stuff we earned during the year at hotels and on airlines, and went to Hawaii for a week and had a great time. But we're excited to be back here and working. We love Texas. I grew up out west of Fort Worth in Mineral Wells, Texas, is where I spent much of my childhood, and then just south of Wichita Falls. So I always enjoy coming back to Texas. My brother is a Brown Trail graduate, and his whole life, he lived in Texas for an entirety of about 4.5 years. But all I heard his whole life is anybody can become an American, but you got to be born a Texan. And he was Texan through and through. And then he went to Brown Trail for preaching school and dealt with the Fort Worth and Dallas area traffic for 2 years. And he took off and went to Arkansas, to a county that's so small they don't even have a stoplight in the entire county. So, but we appreciate you allowing us to come here and to visit with you this morning. We have not done what the training Rob is going to bring you, we haven't done that as a church in decades. I'm talking 40, 50 years since we have congregationally evangelized. And we see it all across the nation that congregations are getting smaller and smaller, and they're closing their doors. Rob's going to bring you some very interesting, almost kind of a little bit scary numbers when he comes to speak to you. But one of those is that we're losing a congregation of the Lord's church every 3 days in America. We have about 150 congregations every year closing their doors in America. So it's a scary time for the church. And if we don't do something different, that's not going to pan out well for us. It won't be but another 20, 30, 40 years, and there'll be no churches of Christ in the United States of America. And so Rob goes, he started the School of Evangelism about 2018, I think it was. Really got it going in about 2020 when he was able to finish up the curriculum and start training congregations. He came to Cville, where we're at, just on the south side of Tulsa, in March of 2021. And we're a small congregation. You know, when Rob came, 21, 22 people. We would occasionally have 23 or 24, but usually about 20 to 22 people was our average. And Rob came and he taught us how to evangelize. Now look, I understand that most people, they want to evangelize, but you don't know what you don't know. And that was our case. We wanted to evangelize, but we just didn't know how to do it effectively. I would do what I call a lot of times just front porch evangelism, where I would sit down with somebody and immediately we'd go right to Acts chapter 2, verse 38, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 21. We'd go to Acts chapter 8 and look at the Ethiopian eunuch. We'd go to Acts chapter 10 and look at Cornelius. We'd talk about Paul or Saul's conversion. It was all about the baptism part, but we never built a foundation. And sometimes you would have somebody that would answer that, and they would go ahead and they would answer the call of the gospel, but in 4 or 5 weeks you never see them again. Why? Because they don't have a foundation. They don't know why they were baptized. They don't understand anything about the church. They don't know about. We were just teaching just baptism. And that's such an important part of it, but it's a piece of the puzzle. There's so much more that they need to know. And so when Rob started teaching about congregational evangelism, it really changed the way that churches evangelize. It changed the culture of the churches that were going through this training. And it worked that way for us in Coweta as well. So in Coweta, we went in 3 years from 22 members to 70 members. We learned how to build a foundation first before we start talking about baptism. They need to know there's some things that they need to know. In fact, if you were to go to Acts chapter 8, verse 12, you would see that when Philip was teaching, he taught 3 things. He taught the name of Christ, he taught the church of Christ, and he taught baptism. We can't just start with baptism. They have to understand who Christ is. Matthew chapter 28, verse 18, Jesus says, all power, or your translation may say all authority, is given to me in heaven and on earth. Well, if Jesus has all authority, how much authority do we have? None, right? If he has all authority, then he has the authority to tell us in the next verse, go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you. And then he adds on this part, and lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the age. I love that part. He's not asking us to go out and do something and just throwing us to the wolves. He says, I'm going to give you what you need to do. I'm going to give you the resources. I'm going to give you the skills. And you know, I don't think that Jesus ever asks for 10 talents from a 2-talent person. So if he asks you or if he commands you to go out and to evangelize, you better believe he's given you the skills to do it. We just got to find out what our role is. We're not all going to be teachers. We're not all going to be We're not all going to sit down and go through Bible studies with people. That's not our skill. We don't want all teachers. It would do us no good if everybody in this room was a teacher, because we need people that can bring contacts. We need people that can show compassion through card writing or through visits or through meals or what. We need all the pieces of the puzzle to work together, and that's how we congregationally evangelize. And that's the training that Rob's going to bring you. He's going to teach you how to do that very, very effectively. So this morning I want to go over to Matthew chapter 10, and I want to look at a few things to get our minds thinking in that direction, thinking in the direction of congregational evangelism. Now, Matthew chapter 10, Jesus is sending these disciples out on what we would call the limited commission. And we call that the limited commission because they were just going to the Jewish people. They weren't going to the Gentiles. And it was this group that he's talking to. He's sending them out to go talk to the Jewish people. Now, when we talk about the Great Commission, that's given to every single one of us. That's not given to just the men that were standing there that day. That's given to every single one of us. He's telling us the number one job that you have on this earth is to go out and seek and save the lost. What Jesus came here for. He tells us that. He says the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. And that's what our mission is as well. So when we get to Matthew chapter 10 here, Jesus is given the directions to his disciples as he prepares them for this limited commission. We know that from Matthew chapter 9, verse 36, that Jesus had compassion on people. He saw people as a sheep without a shepherd. Anybody in here ever have any experience with sheep? Just by show of hands, any shepherds in here? I want to tell you something about sheep. And I didn't know this. A guy that raises sheep told me this. Every day, sheep wake up looking for a way to kill themselves. I mean, that's the way they are. They'll try to run off in a pond. They'll try to run off the edge of a bluff. They'll get tangled up in wire. They're always trying to damage or hurt themselves. And if they don't have a shepherd, they're not going to last very long. And we're the same way. If we don't have a shepherd, we're not going to last very long. Jeremiah says it's not in us to direct our own steps. We need somebody that will guide us, somebody that will feed us and nurture us and take care of us and make sure we're protected. And we get that from Jesus. So he saw that these people were like sheep that had no shepherd. And because of that, he had compassion on them. When you have compassion on somebody, it makes all the difference in the world on whether or not you can teach that person. I remember it's one of those things that we talk about in the School of Evangelism, but I remember when I was a kid in the early 80s in Mineral Wells, Texas, the preacher, the elders, the deacons, they all wore a button on their lapel, and it said, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. See, this is where we've been failing at evangelism. We try to take somebody that we've just met, we don't know anything about them, they don't know anything about us, we have zero relationship with them, and we try to take them straight to the Bible and talk about baptism. They don't even know who we are. They don't know anything about us. They don't know anything about the Scriptures. It means nothing to them. They have no background with it. But with compassion, you build a relationship with somebody. They figure out that you care about them and that you love them and that now you can get somewhere with them. And so this is part of our training in the School of Evangelism. So when we go to Matthew chapter 10, verses 34 through 42, we're going to see some things here. We see right above this that Jesus sent them out. He said they're like sheep going out among the wolves. But he says you don't have to fear the people you're going out to. Why? Because Jesus understood what they were up against. Jesus knew what they were up against. And so God greatly values his disciples. And if he gives us a job, he's going to give us the means to do that. We don't need to be scared to go out and evangelize. We need to be much more fearful of God than we do of men or what could happen to us if we're out talking to people. And so, but there's a picture that he gives us here that I want to talk about. Let's just read chapter 10 of Matthew, and we're going to go from verse 34 down through about verse 39. Let me get over here. Chapter 10, verse 34 through 39. And Jesus says, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be those of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it. Let's just go down to the next few verses. Verse 40, he who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. He who receives a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward, and he who receives a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. And whoever gives one of these little ones only a cup of cold water in the name of a disciple, assuredly I say to you, he shall by no means lose his reward. Jesus is telling us something that we need to know about evangelism, something that we need to know about teaching people, something that we need to know about what the Word of God is going to do. And he says that we can't love our families more than we love God. That's not only for people that we're trying to bring to Christ, that's a message you and I need to understand, because that's going to spur us to go out and evangelize. You see, here's the thing with families. There's going to be and Jesus understood this, there's going to be a deep temptation to put family first. And that makes sense because we read about how important the family is when we're looking at the Scriptures. It's a hard temptation because we know that we need to love our families sacrificially. I love my family more than any, aside from God, aside from Christ, the things in this world, I would do anything for my family. And that's the way we're supposed to feel about our family. But sometimes our love for our family can hold us back from doing what God has asked us to do. Have you ever seen a family, or maybe this has been the case in your family? I've known people over the years that if a person has family that comes to town to visit, no one comes to services that week. Well, I'm not going to be there Sunday because my family's in town. Or I'm not going to be there Sunday because I'm doing this with my family, or I'm doing that with my family. And we have those that are in our families that are not Christians, and they say, well, we've got this family reunion going on, or we got these plans going on. Do you really have to go to services this week? I mean, you go every week. Can't you just miss once? And it can be tempting for us because we love our families to say, well, I guess it'd be okay if I didn't go this one time. I guess it would be. I don't know why we do that. I don't know why our family time comes at the sacrifice of our spiritual time. Why can't our family time and our spiritual time be the same time? Why can't we, when we have family come to town, why can't we say, you know what, we're going to go to services this morning, and we'd sure love for you to come with us? And maybe if they say, no, I don't want to go, okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll be back in just a few hours. Make yourself at home. Or if family time comes on a Sunday for our non-Christian family, and they want to have some get-together and just, I'm sorry, but we can be here by noon. If you could wait, we'll get out of services 11:30, and by noon we'll be over here, and we'll enjoy whatever time together. We don't have to sacrifice spiritual time for family time, but we see what happens so often is that we can be tempted not to do what Christ has told us to do because we don't want to make things uncomfortable or we don't want to make things awkward. How many times have we sat at a family reunion or we sat at the Thanksgiving table with family that are lost? We know that if they die tonight, they're not going to go to heaven, and we don't say a word about Christ. We don't try to teach them because it would be awkward, and we don't want to make it uncomfortable by bringing up God whenever we're trying to have a family function. And we'll sit right there knowing those loved ones are lost. Spiritually, they're lost. But it's uncomfortable for us to step outside of that. Now, the second thing he tells us that we cannot love ourselves more than we love the Lord. And it's in this context of the mission to reach the lost that Jesus says in verse 38 that we're not worthy to follow him if we don't take up our cross. We're not worthy if we don't take up our cross. If we can't get out of our comfort zones, we're not worthy. Why is the church losing 150 congregations every year in the United States of America? Why are we losing over 18,000 Christians every single year in the United States of America? Because we don't want to get out of our comfort zones. That's just the case by and large across the nation. I don't know. I'm not saying this congregation. I don't know you in this congregation. But I'm telling you that going to 45 congregations a year, this is what we see. And it was the case where we were at. People don't want to get out of their comfort zones. You know, maybe that's talking to somebody that would take you out of your comfort zone. Maybe it's just something as simple as I've worked 50 hours this week, and we've got worship services on Friday, and Saturday is my only day off, and I want to have some rest and relaxation time. I don't want to work an 8 or 10 hour shift and come home and have to make a meal and have somebody into my house for a Bible study. It takes away from my me time. But Jesus says if we're not willing to put him before ourselves, if we're not willing to take up that cross, then we're wrong, he says. In fact, I'm not sure we always let it sink into our hearts in that manner. A lot of times we think of carrying the cross as talking about suffering for the cause of Christ or temptations or trials, but we don't think of it in the way of evangelism. But if the greatest mission that he's given us is to go out and to save souls, and we're not doing that because we don't want to be uncomfortable, then we're not fulfilling the mission he's given us. You know, when you go to John chapter 14, verse 15, he says something very, very plainly. He says, if you love me, do what? Keep my commandments. Well, what's the inverse of that then? If we're not keeping his commandments, then can we say that we love him? No. He says, if you love me, keep my commandments. But I'll tell you what we've done. I'll tell you what I did for a long time. We'll take the commandments we like, and we'll keep those. But the ones that we don't care as much for, we kind of just brush that to the side a little bit. I'm not going to look at that page in the Bible. There's a lot of pages in here. Do I really need to look at every one of them? Can't I just skip over Matthew chapter 28 and go on to something else? We have one of our members was studying with a woman one time about baptism. She was from a denomination. She said, I just don't believe that. I don't believe that you have to be baptized to be saved. He said, it's right there in your Bible. He said, you can go to Acts chapter 2, verse 38. She said, that's not in my Bible. He said, what do you mean that's not in your Bible? She said, I ripped that page out. Let's just rip out the pages that we don't like. Jesus tells us, if you want to be my disciple, this is what you got to do. You've got to obey my commandments. And he gives us this command to go out and to evangelize. Carrying the cross means that we deny ourselves so that others can receive the gospel. That image of carrying the cross, it really should push us to our mission. Think about this. We had the limited commission that was just given to them, so we're not counting that. But when we're talking about something that applies to all of us, what mission do you have that's greater than the Great Commission? None. Because there is no other commissions in the Bible. If you could find one, please show it to me. I've never seen it. The Great Commission is that's the mission that he's given us. Go out and to teach other people, to baptize, and then to teach them some more. It's the most important thing we can do. Are there any veterans in here? I know there's Navy. Any other veterans in here? Listen, you guys, men, ladies, you may have been given some important missions in your time in the service. Maybe if you're a police officer or a firefighter, you've had some important missions. But you have never had a mission like the Great Commission. And if we neglect that commission, then what in the world are we even doing? If we don't care enough to lead other people to Christ, why are we sitting in here today? It's not all about us. You know, it's more than just us. We've got to reach out to other people. We've got to lead other people to Christ. I want you to see how Paul puts it in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Turn with me in your Bibles to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and let's look at verses 10 and 11 and see how Paul puts this in his writing. He says, always carrying about in the body the dying of the Lord Jesus, that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our body. For we who live are always delivered to death for Jesus' sake, that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in mortal flesh. We die so that Christ can be seen in us. Now when we say we're dying to ourselves. We're not important. It's not about Keno. It's not about any of us. It's never been about any of us. It's never going to be about any of us. I don't care if you're Paul. I don't care if you're John the Baptizer. I don't care who. It has never been about anybody other than Christ. And you can go all the way to the very beginnings to the book of Genesis, and you can read this all the way through to Revelation, and everything points to Christ. It always points to the cross. That's who's important. That's who gets the glory. So we have to set ourselves aside and understand that this is our mission. And you'll notice that Jesus gives another important picture here in verse 39 of chapter 10. It's important how we see this, that grabbing onto this life and making decisions for this physical life will cost us our souls. See, we have to make a decision. We have two things we got to choose from. Are we going to choose the things that this life has to offer, or are we going to choose the things that the life to come has to offer? This life is so temporal. We're not even going to be here that long. James tells us it's like a vapor. Have you ever been boiling a pot of water and maybe you got a lid on it and you take the lid off and you see that vapor comes up and it's just gone, just that fast? Sometimes it might go all the way to the ceiling before it dissipates. Sometimes it barely clears the top of the pot before it goes away. You know, some of us may leave this life at a younger age than others. Some people might live to be I don't know if you know Paul Mays in Roanoke, Virginia, great preacher, great gospel preacher. His grandmother, who lives in Texas, just died about 2 weeks ago, 114 years old. She was either the 8th or the 10th oldest person in the world when she died. But you know what? 114 years is like that in the grand scheme of time. That's nothing. That's just, bam, here you're gone the next moment. We don't have a lot of time on this earth, so we've got to make use of our time while we're here. We need to make decisions that's going to lead us to the next life, that's going to give us life eternal. Who cares about this life? This life doesn't mean anything. So these three pictures that Jesus is telling us here is that we have to be sent sacrificially. We have been sent sacrificially. We put ourselves to the side for the sake of others. We put our families to the side for Christ's sake. Everything's about Christ, and everything's about leading the lost to Christ. Rob's going to share with you when he comes a way that you can get people into Bible studies like you never dreamed possible. I can tell you we have so many Bible studies now, and we never used to have that, and we have it because we've learned the right things to say at the right times. We've learned the right questions to ask. We've learned the methods, and it's not even Rob's methods, it's Jesus' methods. It's the methods of the first century Christians. You know, those first century Christians, if we want to grow like they did, when you look back at Acts and you see that 3,000 souls were added on the day of Pentecost, many more thousands just in the short time or thereafter. There were people coming to the church. Why? Because they were working. They had compassion on people. They loved people. They cared about people, and they led lost souls to Christ. And so we've got to do the same thing. So when we come down here to verses 40 through 42, Jesus talks about that reward that's going to be given to those who receive God's messengers. He says, if they listen to the apostles, the prophets, or even a righteous person, they're going to receive the same reward. That's one of our drivers behind evangelism. It's one of the reasons we do what we do, because we know how great the reward is for us. We know what God's promised us. It's a wonderful reward. And we can share that with other people, and they can have the same reward. Have you ever gone to a restaurant and you had just a really good meal? You know, we went down to San Antonio to the Northern Oaks Church of Christ down there in San Antonio a few months ago. And Rob told me before I go, he goes, Keno, you have got to go, and you guys have them right here too, Lupe's Tortilla. Any of you ever been to Lupe's Tortilla? You ever heard of that before? There's one about 15 miles from here. He said, you got to go have the fajitas. This is the best fajitas you've ever eaten in your life. Now, why would he share that with me? Because he had gone there, and it was really good. And he wanted me to experience what he had experienced. So I told Mel, I said, Mel, we got to go to Lupe's Tortilla. We got to get the fajitas. He goes, oh, believe me, we're going. It's already planned. And we got down there and we went out and we ate these fajitas and they were phenomenal. And I've told so many people about that since then. I told a couple, an elder, Mark Jeter in Wetumpka, Alabama, about a month ago. He said, I'm going to Fort Worth. And I said, when you do, you got to go to Lupe's Tortilla and get the fajitas. And he texted me and said, Keno, they were delicious. Why would I do that? Because I want him to enjoy what I enjoyed. Have you ever gone to a movie and you see a really good movie and you tell people, you got to go see this movie. It's amazing. You're going to love it. Why do you do that? You want them to enjoy what you're enjoying. You want them to have that same satisfaction. What's the driver behind us going out and teaching people about God? Because we know the reward that's waiting for us, and we want them to enjoy that same reward. We want them to know, to feel what we feel. You look at the drug use in the country today, through the roof. Look at the alcohol abuse through the roof. The pornography, gambling, it's all through the roof. Suicide rate through the roof. Why? Because people have this gaping hole in them and they don't know what to fill it with. But you know what to fill it with. I know what to fill it with. But they're not going to stumble across that. It's so rare that somebody will just stumble across the gospel on their own. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying that some of you haven't done that here. But just about everybody in here was led to Christ by somebody. Somebody taught you. Maybe it was a parent. Maybe it was a spouse. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe it was a coworker. But almost everybody in here was taught by somebody. Imagine if we could take the good news that we know, that we love, that we understand, that we benefit from, if we could take that to people that are suffering, and now they understand what that peace is that surpasses all understanding. They can feel that same hope that we feel. They can feel that same comfort that we feel. How much does that change our world around us? I can't help but think back to, the mid-1960s, 1970s, when 1 out of every 84 or 85 citizens of the United States was a member of the Church of Christ. What an amazing time. The country was a better place for good reason, because the Church of Christ was the fastest growing religious body in the United States. We were involved in every aspect of society. That's the reason this country was flourishing. And now we wonder why the country's in the shape that it's in. It's because the church is dying in this country. And if we could turn that around, we can change things. I don't know your youth group. I met one young man a while ago. I don't know how big your youth group is, but I'm going to tell you something. If we teach our young people that evangelism is who we are, it's what we do, they just grow up knowing that, how much different does the church look 20, 30 years from now? We can once again be growing that way. We're not in a situation where we're past the point of no return. We're not in a situation that we can't turn it around and start growing, but we've got to get busy. And that's the training you're going to learn. You're going to learn how to get busy. Listen, I saw a deal on Facebook one day. It said that it's easy to understand how somebody can honestly be mistaken about something in the Bible. But once you know the truth, you either cease to be mistaken or you cease to be honest. I can say it's easy, because I know, I was there. It's easy to understand how somebody cannot be an evangelistic person. Because if you don't know how to do it, then it makes it very difficult to do it. But once you know how, once you have the training, then there's no excuses, right? You guys are going to get some training like you're not going to believe. You're going to be blown away when Rob comes here and brings you this training. It's exciting. It's encouraging. It's fun. We love to have Bible studies. We have people in our house all the time for Bible studies when we're home. We're not home very often anymore. But when we get home, we try to have somebody in our house at least once a week for a Bible study. Because it not only edifies them, but it encourages us. And it builds us up. And it makes us stronger. And together we can both grow in Christ, with the person we're studying with and with us. And you start seeing those baptisms rolling in, and what are you guys on a Sunday morning? Forrest, what do you guys run, about 120 or so on a Sunday morning? So you start seeing 12, 13, 14, 15 18, 22, 24 baptisms a year, that's pretty encouraging. It's pretty encouraging. And I know you guys are doing some great works. I heard about it last night. I'm not saying that you're slackers. I'm not saying you're not doing anything, but I'm just saying there's so much more we could be doing, right? We could work to our potential. Maybe instead of a percentage of the congregation be involved, we could bring more people in. More people can be involved. Because we're all going to stand before Christ on that day of judgment. We're all going to answer for the deeds that we've done. We're not going to be able to stand there and say, well, really? I didn't know that was mandatory. I thought that was a suggestion. That's not going to work. He's going to say, I told you to do this. Why didn't you do it? Here's the neat thing about congregational evangelism. There's some parts that are, there's things that you could do that are so easy to do. Just writing down a name. Write down 10 names of people you know if they died today, they wouldn't go into heaven. Write those names down and give them to your elders. Bam, right there, you've fulfilled a great commission. Sit down and write out a compassion card to be mailed to somebody. It takes 5 minutes of your time to write 4 or 5 compassion cards on a Sunday afternoon. But you fulfilled a great commission. Maybe somebody just to keep the baptistry clean and ready to go. I'm going to tell you something. I've been in some congregations that the baptistry looks like a farm pond. I mean, it's like lily pads and stuff, frogs and stuff in their baptistry just about. This thing hadn't been used or cleaned out in 10 years. I've been in congregations that you go look in the baptistry and it's bone dry with mop buckets and boxes and stuff being stored in it. How are we going to? We're not even ready to evangelize. So you need somebody that their job is just keeping the baptistry ready. You need somebody, their job is to go down to the bookstore, to Mardell or whatever bookstore you have in the area, Christian bookstore, and get a Bible and put their name on the front of it so we can present that new convert with a Bible. You need people that are going to be able to mentor new converts. Do you know that 80% of all new converts fall out of the church in the first 3 years after their conversion? Most of them much sooner than that. Think about that in this congregation. Of all the people in the last 10 years that have been baptized in this congregation, how many are still here? We got to have a good mentorship. We've got to have a good new convert class. These are all things Rob's going to teach you on. This is all things he's going to train you on, every aspect of this. And we got so many resources for you and so much ongoing training. What Rob's going to bring you is the foundational training, and then you're going to have operational training from now until the Lord comes back. You're always going to be training. And he's going to send all of you that are members are going to get an email every week in your email. It's going to have a 1 to 5 minute training video. There's no reason not to evangelize once you get going in this. It'll take you about 6 months to roll it out. And then we're going to come back down and do some continued education training with you. And when you're done, you're going to grow. You're going to give your elders the biggest headache trying to figure out which wall they've got to knock out to add on another 200 or 300 pews because this room's not going to hold them all. I'm telling you, we went from 22 to 70 in 3 years. Honolulu, Hawaii, and Lima Scene down there, they've gone from like 75 to 175 in 4 years. Back in Maryland, they're baptizing like crazy. In Georgia, they're baptizing like crazy. We have a congregation we work with in Queens, New York, that is baptizing like crazy. In Queens, New York. In Grand Rapids, Michigan, places that you wouldn't think that you could even spread the gospel, they're growing like crazy because they're following the training. And the training is exactly what Christ and what the New Testament Christians did. We haven't added anything. We haven't made anything up. We haven't come up with any aha moment and something that no one's ever known before. In fact, when we first came up with the 6-point model, which Rob's going to show you when he comes, when we first came up with that, Rob didn't come up with it, but first put it on in print. Rob put it on a poster, and he set it up at the booth at polishing the pulpit. And one of the ministers that's very well known, that's preached for years and years and years, a great gospel preacher, and he walked by and he said, Rob, we were doing that. That's exactly what we were doing in the 50s and 60s. Well, yeah, and that's the reason we were growing in the 50s and 60s. But the problem is we quit doing that in the 70s, and we've been going downhill ever since. And now we have generations of young people, 2 generations now of young people that have never seen their mom or dad have a Bible study with anybody. In fact, some of you were up at Ohio with us, and we had a great American mission campaign up there. And Jamie and I met a lady at the next to, let's see, on Friday. I guess it was Friday night we were having a community meal. So earlier on Friday, Jamie and I had to leave from there. It was the hottest week in Ohio when we were there. We're knocking on doors, we were sweating like crazy. And we had to go from there to Syracuse, New York. And so Jamie said, Keno, we got to do some laundry. And I called Rob. I said, Rob, we're not going to be there in the morning. This on Friday. I said, we're going to the laundromat, but we'll be there in the afternoon. He said, that sounds great. So we had knocked on the door of a lady that earlier in the week that was a very good contact. In fact, she ended up being baptized, and she's not missed a service. I mean, she's very, very faithful now. But she didn't have a Bible, and so we were going to take a Bible to her. So I dropped Jamie off at the laundromat, and I go to take a Bible to Angelia. And I come back, it's just a few minutes, and I come back, and there's 10 people in the laundromat, and Jamie's already had made contact with 7 of them. She's inviting them to the community meal, and she's talking to them and building a relationship with them. So I go over and I start talking to the lady that runs the laundromat. She's an elderly woman in her mid-70s. She goes to a Baptist church. And we start talking, and I visit with her for a while, and we get into kind of steer it toward a gospel conversation, and we're visiting for a while, and so I invited her to come to the community meal. She said, Keno, I'm just not interested. I'm not ever going to leave the Baptist church. And I said, Carolyn, I'm not asking you to. I just telling you that we just want to get to know our neighbors. Just come have some good barbecue. It'll be a great time. She said, well, I'll come maybe, but she said, if I do, I'm telling you now, I'm not staying long and I'm not eating. I said, that's fine. We just love to see you. She called me about 30 minutes before it started. She said she was on her way. In fact, she said, Keno, I don't think I'm going to come because you guys are the ones that speak in tongues. I said, no, I think you got us mixed up with another congregation. So we talked for a minute. She found out, no, that was a denomination she was thinking of. So she said, well, I'll go ahead and come. So she came. She got out of her car and she said, I'm not going to stay long and I'm not going to eat. And I said, that's fine. Come on in and let's meet the people. So we came in, and one of the first ladies she saw was a lady she knew from the laundromat. She said, hey, I didn't know you went here. And she said, oh, it's great to see you. And they start talking, and Carolyn was the last person to leave the parking lot that night. She stayed the whole time. She had a great visit, and this lady she was talking to got her to agree to a Bible study. So I'm visiting with this lady the next day on Saturday before we leave. And she said, Keno, I'm a nervous wreck about this Bible study. And I said, don't be nervous. It's easy. You'll go through it. You'll have no problem. We'll help you through it. Your elders and your preacher, they're going to help you go through this Bible study. She said, you don't understand, Keno. She said, I'm 65 years old. I got baptized when I was 15 years old, and I have never had a Bible study with somebody before. I said, you're not alone. That's probably 80% of the church today. We have spent our whole lives never having Bible studies. And then we wonder why the church is dying. So we've got to turn that around. Let's look at a few more things before we wrap up. We're about out of time. So Jesus talks about the reward to those. He says, whoever, when you go out and you take this gospel message, not only are you going to benefit from that reward, but they're going to benefit from that reward as well. And then he expands on this idea. He goes in the opposite direction. He says that when your reward is their reward. And he talks about if you share that with other people, they're going to benefit in the same way that you would benefit, which then in turn makes you feel good. It excites you when you see somebody that you know they've given their life to Christ. But then I want you to see what he says in verse 42. He says, whoever gives even a cup of cold water because he's a disciple will not lose his reward. Friends, even your smallest efforts are important. I think sometimes we get this big idea that we've got to do something great big in the name of the Lord for evangelism, and it's so big that we get overwhelmed and then we just sit back and don't do anything at all. Like we got to feel like, hey, I've got to go meet somebody. I've got to build a relationship with that person. I've got to teach that person. I've got to baptize that person. I've got to mentor that person. It's too overwhelming. I can't do all that on my own. Plus, doing that time and time and time again, I can't do it on my own. Guess what? That's right. You can't do it on your own. You'll wear yourself out. That's why it takes all of us. Somebody brings a name. Somebody else helps with the meal. Somebody else makes the transition visits. Somebody else does the Bible study. Somebody else takes care of the mentorship. Somebody else teaches the new convert class. It's all the little small things that are important. I would far rather us do a bunch of small things than one great big thing that ends up not even happening because we get too overwhelmed. And I think that's what Jesus is saying here. He's saying, we're thinking about being sent out into the world as a big, huge mission that we can't accomplish. But Jesus says that's not what he's talking about. Even the little small things are important. Even the little small things that make a big difference with people. We need to be people who are willing to do seemingly small tasks to be able to reach the world. There's nothing too small in the work of evangelism. In fact, Jesus uses this picture of giving a cold cup of water. He says, because we're disciples as an example. We would probably think that this is something small. It's not worth our time. But I'm going to tell you something. Baptisms is not the most important part of evangelism. Bible studies is not the most important part of evangelism. You want to know what the most important part of evangelism is? Contacts. Having somebody to study with. If nobody can come up with anybody that needs to have a Bible study, then we're not ever going to have a Bible study. And if we don't ever have a Bible study, we're not going to have a baptism. So if you got 120 people in this congregation, if you want to grow by at least 10%, which that's what our goal is annually, if you grow by 10% a year, every year for 7 years, you'll double in size every 7 years. And so when we're looking at contacts, that's the most important part of the Bible study. You need 1,200 contacts in this congregation. Rob's going to show you how to do that. It's very easy. I can answer those questions. We could have a whole lesson on contacts, and you would see how easy it is to get 1,200 contacts. 1,200 souls that if they died tonight, they wouldn't go to heaven. It's what you need to be able to grow. Because that 1,200 contacts, when you prospect those down into people that actually are going to hear the message, you're going to be back down to about 120. And out of that 120, you're going to get about 11 or 12 of those into a Bible study. And you can use different Bible studies, but if you use the Back to the Bible, it's the one we usually use, it's about a 90% conversion rate. So out of that 12 that you get in a Bible study, you're going to baptize 11 of them. And that's how you grow the church. You got to have a lot to get to a few. It's biblical. Matthew chapter 22, verse 14 is biblical. Many are called, but few are chosen. So you got to have a bunch to get to that few. He's going to teach you how to get to those many so that you can get to the few. Listen, almost everybody is willing to hear the gospel at some point in their life, but for most people, it's not today. We know not a lot of people. You can go to Matthew chapter 7, and it's very clear, not everybody's going to want to hear the gospel. Not everybody you talk to is going to convert. That's okay. We know that. Jesus tells us that. But we've got to go to every single person that we can in hopes of getting the few that will. Let's go over and look as we wrap up at Romans chapter 12, verses 6 through 8. Romans chapter 12, verses 6 through 8. Having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, let us prophesy in proportion to our faith. We know that was a limited office in the first century. But he says, or in verse 7, or ministry, let us use it in our ministering. He who teaches is teaching, or in teaching. He who exhorts in exhortation. He who gives with liberality. He who leads with diligence. He who shows mercy with cheerfulness. Can you teach? If you can teach, then do whatever you can to teach other people. Do whatever you can. Can you serve? If you can, then do whatever you can to serve other people. Go out and make those transition visits. Go out, take somebody to a meal. Go out and visit somebody in the hospital. Go out and check on people. Whatever it is you can do. Go out and talk to others about the gospel. Have gospel conversations with people. Can you encourage? Then do the work of an encourager. Pat people on the back. Tell them they're doing a good job. Be there to build them up and to lift them up. Can you be generous? Then do the work of generosity. We need generous people to help with evangelism. That's how we're able to carry out the works that we're doing. Can you lead? Then look to lead. Not only as a future elder, but just maybe in your position. Maybe you can be a coordinator. We're going to need people in this congregation that can serve as coordinators over various aspects of the evangelism model. Can you do that? Could you get together with a team and help? And if we gave you all the training that you could ever imagine to where you knew inside and out what your job is, could you be a coordinator and help lead the teams? Maybe take some of the stress and pressure off your elders and help them out with that? Can you show mercy? Can you show love to those that are lost? The mission that we're sent on is a sacrificial mission, and we have to be willing to give ourselves in these areas. We have to be willing to do this. No work is more important, and no work is too small. Anything that we can do to help spread the gospel. Give me one more minute, we'll wrap up. Jesus wants our loyalty to Him to be greater than anything else, greater than our family, greater than our own comforts, greater than anything else. He wants our loyalty to be so strong to Him that our whole purpose in this life, is to lead other people to them. I know you guys are cut out for the work. I know you are. I really enjoyed dinner and the visit we had last night. It's so encouraging to hear about this congregation and your love for people. And I know that you can do this training Rob's going to bring you. Now, it's going to take you out of your comfort zone. Don't get me wrong. I'm not telling you it's easy. It's work. But what greater work is there? It's the most important way. It's the most rewarding work. And you will feel so much closer to God when you strike out on this endeavor. There's a lot of work to do. We're here to support you. We're here to train you. We're going to bring you so much training that you'll be sick of training. We're going to give you so many resources that there'll be zero excuse not to do what we're talking about here. I can't wait to see what happens with this congregation in just a year or two, how much this congregation will grow. I know it'll grow. I've seen it at 350 to 400 congregations across the country over and over and over and over again. It works every time when you follow this model because it's Jesus' model. It's perfect. If we just do what Jesus did, then it works. I'll leave you with that, and we'll prepare for our morning worship service. Thank you so much.